resolve that if indeed those are the correct statistics that you present.
Those statistics are absolutely unacceptable, and my friend Rosa Valoro from Connecticut and I have worked on this issue for many years. We have to strengthen Head Start, we have to expand Head Start, and there are other programs which we fund at the federal level and pass the money down to the states that will provide specifically for the nourishment, both mind and body, of our young kids. In fact, this president voted to get S-chip, which would have provided for $10 million more in health care for our children. This is absolutely unacceptable. I don't know my opponent's position on S-chip, but it is absolutely essential that we worry about those children. And let me say this, leaving it to the states isn't going to work. If you check with Governor Patterson, we have a huge deficit. And this is why I've been supporting revenue sharing the way we used to have it. It should be part of our package that we're putting together, our stimulus package. Certainly revenue sharing is essential. If we have this huge deficit and huge debt in Washington and all the states around the country are suffering, we have a responsibility to help these kids. And I thank you for bringing up this very important issue. And that doesn't mean that you're not working with not-for-profits, but they are also in need, especially if it's a difficult economic time, and the government can be very helpful in being partners with many of these groups.
Next question.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Wilson from 25 Parkview Avenue in Bronxville, which is actually Yonkers. Congresswoman Lowey, first I'd like to say thank you so much for your many years of excellent service to our district. I appreciate it tremendously. As a real estate attorney and a realtor, I have a question specific about state taxes and real property gains tax. In each administration, what would the position of each party be about that? The estate tax is due to change after 2011, the exclusion, and I was told that in Obama administration, the $250,000 and $500,000 property gains exclusion would be eliminated, and my clients and I have concerns about that.
Well, who's first? It is you. Thank you very much for your kind words. And let me just say that in Westchester County, when you're making $200,000 to $250,000 a year, you don't feel so rich. So one of the big issues that I've had, and people like Jerry Nadler of Manhattan and others are my partners, is developing a system where you evaluate the proposals in light of the median income of the community. So we're going to be looking at that. Your first question was estate taxes, however. I have a bill which I introduced. Well, let me just backtrack and say there are those who want to get rid of it, and there are those who want to modify it. And I think given this huge debt right now, there's no way we're going to get rid of it completely, so let's be honest about it. And my bill expands the exemption to $6 million and decreases the percentages. So by dealing with a plan that will help many, many people in our district throughout the country more reasonably, I think we would have greater success. I can't remember now if the Ways and Means Committee, they may expand it to $5 million, but we're very close on that. And I hope we can be successful because it's a key issue. We can't just let everything go and let all these tax cuts expire by 2010. So we're going to be looking at that carefully, and I hope my bill is successful, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay, Mr. Russell.
I would keep the exclusion from the estate tax in the 2 to 3 million range, so that I guess that those persons who are very wealthy should have to pay a certain amount of tax on their inheritance. And as far as capital gains on property, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of that in the near future. But I do think that that one-time exclusion should be maintained, and we should try and allow people to keep the gains on the sale of their home.
All right, next question.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Lesnick. I'm a Yonkers resident, City Council President, and responding for a request for infrastructure improvements, you mentioned a stimulus bill. And how can we make sure that we get money for local infrastructure? From the Tappan Zee Bridge to the schools and roads in Yonkers, if you're going to spend the money to put the country back on track, let's see it be spent locally and rebuild one of the crumbling bridges like that.
Mr. Russell?
Well, my position on things that sometimes smack of earmarks and essentially kickbacks from the federal government from the taxes we pay is one that I'm against earmarks, pork spending, and I'm in favor of reducing the taxes of the individual federal taxes. And if there's a state project, certainly let's use taxes, state taxes, to address these things. If it's an interstate type of a bridge or something of that nature, let's have a federal bill that addresses that specifically and get the project resolved. However, there's a tendency with earmark type of legislation that helps, I guess, the incumbent to come around and say, well, I've got a certain amount of money for this community, that community, for this purpose. I've procured funds, when essentially those are taxpayer dollars. So I'd like to see each individual project funded specifically with a specific vote, either at the federal or the state level. And I'd also, I noted that as far as federal projects are concerned, we're pretty low in this area as far as, as far as actual grants of money may come through. But as far as contracts for local businesses or long-term defense type contracts, I think we're around 375 out of 435 congressional districts.
Ms. Lowey?
Number one, I strongly support investment in infrastructure and revenue sharing. It creates jobs, and it's the best, fastest stimulant for the economy. Number two, I've worked very hard. Republicans were really going wild with the earmarks, but I've worked very hard with the Democrat majority to bring transparency and clarity to the earmark process. I love earmarks, and I wonder what you'd like to give back for Yonkers. The after-school program, the money for Bronxville, $5.5 million for FEMA, the money for the police, the firefighters, and you even said you didn't like the Homeland Security money for Blythedale and Solomon Schechter. By the way, there are 41 New York City organizations that got money to improve their security through the Homeland Security program, and that money was distributed based on recommendations from the state. So I think what's important is that you don't have someone like Senator Stevens, frankly, who gets hundreds of $millions for the bridge to nowhere, but projects for after-school program, I call them congressionally directed investments, because who knows this community better than a city council president and a congresswoman and an assemblyman? We have the opportunity to make these investments, and I frankly think they're very important. And by the way, if you don't do it through the member of Congress, you're giving it all to the federal agency, and I can give you a history of that. That's not always so fair as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
My name is Matt Wallach, been with Advocate at the Park here. Question, I wonder what's your opinion on like capacity for energy purposes, whether it's nuclear,